The history of the world is not written in ink, but in the scars of the land and the echoes of the aether. Before the great floating cities cast their shadows upon the earth, and before the Arcanum Empire spanned the known continents, there was only the Mud Age. It was a time of desperate survival, where humanity huddled in cold caves, fearing the beasts that roamed the twilight forests, ignorant of the power sleeping beneath their very feet. For 1,000 years we were prey. We possessed no claws to rend flesh, no thick hide to turn a blade. We were naked against the cold indifference of the cosmos. But then, in the cavern of deep echoes beneath the Iron Mountains, a lone miner named Kalen struck his pickaxe against a geode that did not break, but hummed. He had discovered the first soul gem, the crystallized essence of magic itself. The discovery of the soul gems changed the fundamental laws of our existence. Kalen found that by focusing his will through the crystal, he could create fire without flint and light without oil. He brought this fire to his tribe, not as a weapon, but as a shield. For the first time, the shadows of the forest retreated, and the beasts that hunted us learned a new emotion: fear. Knowledge of the gems spread like wildfire across the continent of Orodeth. Tribes united not by blood, but by the color of the crystals they mined. The red gems of the volcanic south birthed the pyromancers. The blue gems of the coast created the hydromancers, and the rare white gems of the high peaks gave rise to the aeromancers, the architects of the future empire. But power, as it always does, invited conflict. The War of the Prisms began not over territory, but over the supply of magic. The pyromancers, aggressive and fueled by the volatile energy of their red stones, sought to burn the forests of the hydromancers to the ground. For 2 centuries, the continent was a tapestry of scorched earth and boiled rivers. It was a chaotic infancy for a species just learning to wield godhood. The stalemate was broken by the arrival of the first Archon, Valerius. He was not a master of one element, but a scholar who discovered the art of resonance. He realized that the gems were not separate powers, but fragments of a single harmonic frequency. By tuning a white gem to the frequency of a red one, he could nullify fire with air. He did not conquer the warlords, he silenced them. Valerius founded the city of Arcanum on the central plateau. It was to be a neutral ground, a place of learning where the prisms could unite. Under his guidance, the raw, wild magic of the tribes was refined into the structured, high magic of the empire. The mud huts were replaced by towering spires of white marble, held together not by mortar, but by permanent levitation spells. This was the dawn of the Golden Epoch. With the unification of the schools, the Arcana Empire turned its gaze upward. Why be bound to the earth, subject to earthquakes and floods? The Aeromancers proposed a project of unimaginable scale, the Ascension. They would use the massive geode network beneath the plateau to lift the entire capital city into the clouds. The ritual of Ascension took 40 days and 40 nights. Thousands of mages chanted in unison, pouring their will into the bedrock. Then, with a sound like the earth cracking open, the plateau severed itself from the crust. Arcanum rose. The waterfalls that once fed the rivers below now fell into the empty sky, mist in the lands beneath as the city climbed to its new throne in the heavens. Life in the sky city of Arcanum was a paradise. Disease was eradicated by the biomancers. Hunger was solved by the agrimancers who grew crops in seconds. The citizens of the sky looked down upon the surface world, now called the Shadowlands, with a mix of pity and arrogance. They believed they had transcended the messy reality of nature. But an empire needs resources, and the sky was barren of minerals. Thus began the era of the tether. The Arcanum constructed the great chains, miles-long elevators of enchanted steel that connected the floating city to the surface mines. The people left behind in the Shadowlands were the serfs, the miners, digging in the dark to fuel the light above. For 300 years, this symbiotic, parasitic relationship endured. The Sky Lords grew more powerful, experimenting with the fabric of reality itself, while the surface dwellers grew resentful. It was in the mines of Sector 4 that a new discovery was made, not a gem of light, but a vein of void stone, a rock that did not store magic, but devoured it. The surface rebels, led by a former slave named Orodeth, realized the weapon they held. If the Sky City lived on magic, the Void Stone was its poison. They began to smuggle shards of the stone up the great chains, hiding them in shipments of grain and ore. The plan was not to conquer the city, but to bring it down. In the High Council of Arcanum, the Archmages were blind to the threat from below. They were too busy gazing at the stars. Archmage Lyra had begun the Starlight Project, an attempt to open portals to other worlds. She believed the future of the Empire lay not on Orodeth, but in the multiverse. Her hubris would be the Empire's undoing. The night of falling stars began silently. The rebels detonated the Void Stones simultaneously at the anchor points of the city's levitation grid. There was no explosion of fire, only a sickening lurch. The hum of the ether, the sound that had been the heartbeat of the city for centuries, simply stopped. Panic is too soft a word for what followed. As the anti-gravity spells failed, the massive marble towers began to crumble under their own weight. The great chains snapped, whipping through the air like lashes of the gods, destroying entire districts. The Sky City, the jewel of the clouds, began its long, screaming descent toward the earth it had scorned. Archmage Lyra, in a final act of desperation, tried to use the Starlight Portal to teleport the city to safety, but the Void Stone interference corrupted the spell. Instead of moving the city, the portal ripped open a tear in reality. Horrors from the space between dimensions, the Void Eaters, poured into the falling city, feeding on the dying magic. The impact of Arcanum hitting the surface was felt on the other side of the planet. The shockwave flattened forests and boiled lakes. The city did not land intact. It shattered into 1,000,000 pieces, creating the region now known as the Ruined Expanse. The Golden Age ended in a single afternoon of dust and silence. For the survivors in the Shadowlands, the fall was not a victory. The impact kicked up a cloud of ash that blocked the sun for 10 years, the long winter. Magic, once abundant, became unstable and wild. The Void Eaters that escaped the crash roamed the dark, hunting anything that possessed a spark of ether. Civilization regressed. The high knowledge of the Arcanum was lost, preserved only in fragments by the order of the Keepers. These scribes, operating in secret bunkers, tried to save what they could of history, science, and magic, knowing that humanity would one day need to rebuild. They were the candles in the darkness. 3 generations passed. The ash clouds finally thinned, revealing a bruised and altered world. The majestic beasts of the old world were gone, replaced by mutated creatures warped by the leaking magical radiation of the ruins. Humanity had survived, but we were no longer the masters of Orodeth. We were scavengers in the graveyard of giants. It was in this new age that the warlord era began. Without a central empire, city-states rose from the ashes, built within the carcasses of the fallen skyships. The iron holes in the west, who rejected magic and embraced steam and steel. The mystic remnant in the east, who tried to breed a new generation of sorcerers to control the void. The iron hulls discovered that the void stone, properly refined, could power machines of war without the risk of summoning monsters. They built the first dreadnoughts, massive land tanks that rolled on treads the size of houses. Their goal was simple: to eradicate every trace of magic from the world, blaming it for the fall. The Second Great War was not fought in the sky, but in the mud. Magic versus machine. The dreadnoughts tore through the ranks of the bound monsters, while sorcerous storms rusted the tanks where they stood. It was a grinder that chewed up the remaining population, leaving nothing but bones and scrap metal. As the war raged, a young scavenger named Alara found something in the deep ruins of Sector Zero, the crash site of the High Council's tower. She found the Chronicler, an ancient automated golem that contained the true history of Arcanum. It wasn't a weapon, it was the truth. The truth about Valerius, the connection to the earth, and the harmony that was lost. The Chronicler revealed that the Aether and the Void were not enemies, but 2 sides of the same coin. Balance was the key. Ilara realized that the war between machine and magic was a false dichotomy. She traveled across the battlefields, broadcasting the Chronicler's message, gathering those who were tired of the killing. This became the Union of the Gray. Ilara's followers built a new settlement, not in the sky and not in the mines, but in the valleys. They used small magic to heal the land and small machines to till the soil. They rejected the extremes. It was a fragile piece, a seedling trying to grow in a scorched forest. The warlords and the sorcerers did not take kindly to this defection. They united for one final purpose: to crush the Union. The Battle of Green Valley was the last stand of the old world against the new. But the land itself seemed to fight for Ilara. The dormant spirits of Orodeth, awakened by the return of balance, rose up. The victory was not total, but it was enough. The iron hulls retreated to their rust forts, and the mystics vanished into the wastelands. The Union of the Gray survived. They began the slow, painful work of healing the planet. They planted the first world tree since the Mud Age, a symbol of the connection between earth and sky. 500 years have passed since Ilara's time. The story of the Sky City is now a myth, a bedtime story told to children. But if you look up on a clear day, you can still see the debris of Arcanum, the ring of ruin orbiting the planet, a glittering warning written in the stars. Do not fly too close to the sun, lest you burn your wings.
History is a circle. We rose from the mud. We ascended to the stars. We fell to the ruin. And we returned to the earth. The ether still hums in the deep places, and the void still whispers in the dark. We are the stewards of the middle ground, and for now, that is enough. But to understand the true depth of the Arcanum's hubris, we must look back at the Bioforge experiments. In their quest for perfection, the Sky Lords did not just manipulate stone, they manipulated life. They created the Chimera Corps, soldiers bred with the strength of bears and the sight of eagles, designed to police the surface. These chimeras were loyal until the fall. When the control spells broke, they didn't die. They escaped into the wilds of the Shadowlands. The monsters that the Iron Hulls fought were not just random mutations. They were the great-grandchildren of the Empire's own police force. The sins of the fathers literally hunting the sons. Let us also speak of the Library of Whispers. Before the fall, the Arcanum stored their memories not in books, but in liquid thought strands. When the city crashed, these vats ruptured. The ruined expanse is haunted not just by ghosts, but by leaking memories. Travelers there often hear voices, history replaying itself in the air. One such memory looped forever in the crater of Sector 7 is the trial of Architect Jaren. He was the one man who voted against the Ascension. He warned that severing humanity from the earth would sever our souls. He was laughed out of the council. Now, his ghostly echo stands in the wasteland screaming, "I told you so," to an audience of rocks. The economics of the Sky City were built on the ether standard. Currency wasn't gold, it was charged crystals. If you ran out of charge, you were literally poor. This created a society where the rich glowed with power, and the poor faded into the shadows. Dim light became a slur for the lower class. It was a literal meritocracy of energy. This class divide fueled the rebellion just as much as the slavery below. The dim lights of the city aided the smugglers. They opened the service hatches. They disabled the censors. The fall of Arcanum was an inside job as much as an outside attack. A structure that is rot from within needs only a small push to collapse. We must also consider the role of the dragons. In the old world, they were apex predators. The Arcanum hunted them to near extinction because dragons naturally absorbed aether. They were competition. The few dragons that survived hid in the deepest volcanoes. When the city fell, the dragons returned, reclaiming the skies that had been denied to them. The iron hulls of the later age developed dragon harpoons specifically to counter this threat. The aerial battles between steam-powered dirigibles and ancient dragons were the stuff of legend. Metal versus scale. It was a war for the dominance of the atmosphere. A war that neither side truly won.
And what of the ocean? When the city rose, the oceans receded. When it fell, the impact caused mega tsunamis that reshaped the coastlines. The great port cities of the pre-magic era, long forgotten, were drowned. There is an entire underwater history of Orodeth, submerged ruins of the Mud Age, waiting to be discovered. The cult of the sky still exists today. Fanatics who believe the Arcanum will rise again. They gather the debris, trying to rebuild the levitation grid. They are tragic figures, worshipping a corpse. They do not understand that some things are meant to stay fallen. Gravity is the law, and the law always wins in the end. There is a rumor, unsubstantiated, that one tower of Arcanum did not fall, the Spire of Silence, the personal laboratory of Emperor Valerius. Some say it drifted into the upper atmosphere, frozen in orbit, containing the preserved body of the first Archon and the secret to the ultimate magic. It is the holy grail of scavengers. If you walk the pilgrim's path in the Green Valley, you will see the statue of the unnamed worker. It is not dedicated to a mage or a king, but to the miner who struck the first void stone. It reminds us that the smallest hands can topple the highest thrones. History is driven by the invisible masses, not just the visible heroes. The food of the Arcanum was legendary. Sun bread, baked with captured sunlight. It sustained a man for a week. The recipe was lost, but the Union of the Gray is trying to recreate it using solar mirrors. It is a symbol that we can have the wonders of the past without the cruelty. We can bake the bread without enslaving the baker. The music of the spheres. The Arcanum mages claimed they could hear the song of the universe. We now know this was the hum of the planetary magnetic field. They mistook science for divinity. This is the recurring tragedy of Orodeth. We look for gods, and we find only physics. But perhaps physics is divine enough. In the end, the Chronicle of the Aether Lords is a story about balance. The vertical axis, the sky and the deep earth, is unstable. The horizontal axis, the land, the horizon, the community, is where life thrives. We are not meant to be angels or demons. We are meant to be human, and that is a hard enough job as it is. The archives of the Iron Hulls mention a Project Titan, a giant mechanical man designed to catch falling debris. It was never finished. Its massive skeletal hand still sticks out of the desert sand in the southern wastes. Travelers use the fingers as shade. It is a monument to an ambition that literally reached too high. The magic system of Orodeth was based on will. You didn't just need a crystal, you needed the willpower to command it. This is why the Arcanum became a tyranny. Only the most stubborn, the most ego-driven individuals could become archmages. It was a system that naturally selected for narcissism. The kindest souls were the weakest mages. But Ilara proved that will could be collective. When the Union fought, they didn't link crystals, they linked minds. 1,000 small wills beating in unison. The chorus of the Grey was a magic the archmages never understood. It was the magic of empathy, and empathy, it turns out, is the strongest shield of all. So concludes the first volume of our history, from the mud to the sky and back again. The world of Orodeth keeps spinning. The scars heal, the ruins become hills, the stories become myths, and we, the storytellers, keep the flame alive. Until next time, remember, keep your feet on the ground, but keep your eyes on the horizon.